My
my
good
God.
friend Tyler Diehl is here, and he is a travel agent with Dog Travel. You've actually been on the podcast before. Hi,
I
Tyler.
have. Right.
You're one of the OG guests, I feel, way back in the
Yeah.
day.
I end up being like anonymous callers every now and then too.
That is true. We get random voicemails. We haven't been using our voicemail system as much. I need to actually go check that and see what's happening.
You should check it.
Oh boy, there's probably some gifts for me. If you follow me on Instagram, I recently went on a rant about Expedia. I had some really bad travel dynamics happen with them over the holidays, and I had to eat my words because Tyler told me multiple years ago, do not ever book through a third party. And so whenever I was going on this rant, and I'll get more into like the Expedia story in a minute for those of you who didn't see that on Instagram, but we went back after that happened and we were thinking about our first podcast. It kind of came back up because, again, Tyler had warned me never to use third party travel for booking. And we were like, whoa, the whole travel world has changed immensely because that was pre COVID. So
Yeah.
we're going to kind of get into some of the same topics, but the updated version. And Tyler's going to give tips on easy ways to travel, tips that we should know if you're thinking of booking a big trip, how things have changed over the years. But you actually do entertainment travel, which is how we know each other. So
Right.
explain to the listeners what you do and how you got into this.
So when I was living in Los Angeles, I was working in hotels as an entertainment sales manager, which is kind of
Okay.
like when you go and travel,
Yeah.
someone is calling the entertainment sales manager at that hotel to get the group set up.
Okay.
So they're specifically in charge of the entertainment industry. And
Okay.
so that's what I was doing in hotels.
So there's like a
And
specific rep for that at each hotel.
not every
Interesting.
hotel, but like the nicer
The
hotels
bigger
and
ones.
the
Yeah.
boutiques and yeah.
Hmm.
And so part of that job was me going to travel agencies and basically selling the hotel. Like,
Hmm.
here's our property. This is what we have. This is what we can do for you. And then
Yeah.
hoping that that agency would push some of their bookings to our property.
Okay.
So that kind of introduced me to the travel agent world because before that, I didn't know anything about it. And I went to school for hotel restaurant management. No one really even
I
mentioned
didn't even know that was a thing either.
hotel restaurant management.
I mean, I get it's just like, I don't know that you can major in that.
Oh
That's
my
so
gosh, yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So it's seeing these travel agencies, and I think a lot of people have an idea in their head of what a travel agent is or does.
Yeah.
You know, you think of like someone sitting with like a headset and they're booking a cruise or, we've talked about this before, but that's not what I was seeing. I was seeing these like younger people, you know, driving these really nice cars. And I was like, what is it? Like, I didn't
Like, how is
understand what
this
was happening.
happening?
Yeah. So I just got tuned in, I guess. And
Yeah.
then an opportunity came up. One of the agents that I was visiting, she was hiring an assistant. And it was kind of crazy because I was on a track and I decided to leave this like secure, situation of a steady paycheck and health insurance and all that to go work for her as her assistant to like learn that side of our business. And it just went from there. I worked for her for a little while. She's crazy. Um, but she did teach me a lot and she was like old school Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like she worked on like Dances with Wolves
Oh
and
my
like some
gosh.
some really
It's my
big.
dad's favorite movie.
And because of her, really, I got like, like moved into the entertainment space. And then I went out on my own and have been on my own ever since. That was in 2014, 2013. Then I had an office in Beverly Hills. And then, now in Nashville, I've worked on big budget movies and I do a lot of music touring. And there's more to it than just that, but it's like the bulk of it is,
Yeah.
moving the tours around from city to city and the crew and people like you.
Mhm. I
Mhm.
don't that's what I don't think a lot of people understand about the music industry is a great example, for instance, with all this touring. You don't really think about all of the pieces that go into that puzzle on a day to day. And when you show up in a job like either one of ours, and you see all of the people and all of the pieces. I mean, there is so much that goes into people seeing, especially these big stadium shows and stuff, and
Yeah.
you're kind of at the beginning stages of that. So what
Mhm.
kind of thing are you booking? Like rooms, flights, all of that stuff for the tours?
All of it. Yeah. I mean, everything from, the plane ticket to the hotel room to the greeter at the airport, the car service that's picking up the talent and taking them, to dropping them off backstage, waiting for them. I mean, we basically anything that falls under the umbrella of travel.
Movement, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Movement from
Um,
one place to another.
and it is really crazy, like, when you see the big picture, like you
Mhm.
said, somebody goes to a 2-hour-long movie or, a 2.5, 3-hour show, but, like, all the work
That
that
goes
went
into that.
into
Yeah,
just that show is
yeah,
just so wild.
it is wild. What's the craziest request you've ever gotten or kind of demand you've had to fulfill in the line of work that you do?
There have honestly been so many, and, like,
Can't even
I
pick one?
I've thought about this before. I wish I had, like, written them down along the way. I used to have a sheet that I would write, like, ridiculous things that people said, and we would laugh about it, and I
Yeah.
don't know where that is now, but some of the weird or, like, out there requests, there was a pop musician who wanted every time we did rental cars for her, we would have to reserve, like, 3 to 4 different options
For
so
her to
that when
pick
sh
from?
Mhm.
Oh, boy.
And, like, you know, calling your Hertz rep and, like, talking to them about this, of course, they're, like, rolling their eyes, but
Right.
but you do it, you
Of
make it
course.
happen, and so that was up there. She also had a weird, like, nothing could have a scent, like,
Mm.
so she would get into a car service and, like, the driver had on cologne. He would get out
Oh,
and
boy.
need another car.
Was this pre-pandemic or post?
This was post, actually.
Wow, because I
Yeah,
do feel like and we'll get into some of the other big changes. I feel like after the pandemic, some of the diva behavior has had to go. That's been my experience because everyone's been a little shut down, or in the world that I work in, obviously, it's country, and so maybe people are a little more chill. I don't know, the pop world seems a little more diva, but it feels
yeah.
like after the pandemic, people kinda got a grasp on, "Yo, that's not that important." Like, get some perspective.
I don't know if I would fully agree, but, like, maybe that
Oh.
is your experience, but
Yeah.
I have kind of experienced pretty much the opposite.
Oh,
Like,
really?
we've talked about this before, you and I, but COVID was I felt like it was it forced everybody to slow down. Well, not everybody,
Mhm.
but most people to stop and just kind of, like, take a breath and, like, you know, really look inward.
Yeah.
And my biggest hope during COVID was that we were gonna come out of it and people were gonna be a little more relaxed and not because there's some bad behavior
Mhm.
swirling around
Mhm.
pre-COVID. And I think some people got the memo, but then some people, like, doubled down.
Yeah.
And what happened was the customer service aspect after COVID has changed. I think before COVID, we were still functioning on that customer's always right,
Mhm.
and that is not the case anymore.
Oh,
And you see pushback from people in customer service jobs when people are behaving badly or whatever, or even not behaving badly. People are just fed up. And
mhm.
so all of a sudden you have these people who doubled down after COVID, and now they're met with the customer service agent who is not entertaining that behavior
Not
anymore. So
happening.
it's been this, like, and I've seen a lot of that. Um,
Mhm.
and I actually have been, like, the last couple of years, we've all been through it, but, like, even myself with some of the people that I was working with, I was like, this isn't really lining up with, like, what
Mhm.
I want to be doing or
Mhm.
who I want to be dealing with. So I mean, I've made some changes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the country world is a little different.
Yeah, a little more chill.
It's softer, yeah.
Well, you brought up, obviously, customer service, which is the perfect transition into my
Your
Expedia
nightmare.
meltdown. So when we recorded, I think it was 2018 when the podcast first started, or maybe the beginning of 2019 that we
Yeah.
were first discussing these things. And you literally said to me straight up, verbatim, do not ever book through a third party site. And I was like, okay, okay, I hear you. Your reasoning being if something goes wrong, you can't really get in touch with anyone that can make changes for you,
Mhm.
then the hotel or the airline is out of luck with helping you too because you booked through this third party. And I heard you, I believed you, but I hadn't experienced it for myself. And so I think I still was taking shortcuts on some things. And that's what that feels like to me. It's like if you go into, I mean, my experience is Expedia, so I'll say that. If I go into plug in something into that, it makes it a lot easier for me. It takes out some of the research, things like
Mhm.
that. And so I would just do it. And a lot of times they advertise lower prices. I didn't do this all the time, but if I was going somewhere like I was over the holidays where I had never been, it just felt like it made it a little easier. However, my experience, the customer service piece that you just mentioned is exactly right. There was no at all like customer service, the customer is right. Oh, we see where you could have read our tiny little fine print in that vein and applied
Mhm.
it in a different way than we meant it. There was none of that. They didn't care. It
They're
was
like,
very
"Sorry,
much
bitch."
yeah, exactly. Like, seems like you're out of luck, but you're still
Yeah.
paying for 2 nights even though you're staying for 1. And that was the instance, and it became this thing where I was like, "I don't even care about the money. It's the principle of how much they don't care and how much I am proving my point of the misleading website information, and they just didn't care. It was very much like if I would prove a point, "Oh, well, you didn't look at this part and that part," and it was like, when I say fine print, teeny tiny in the background of some 8 emails that I didn't get or, whatever, and they didn't
Yeah.
care. And so
Yeah.
I texted you and I was like, "Wow, you are right." So let's talk through third party sites and give people maybe the insight that you gave me before, but also with how things are now a little different, like, why would you say don't use a third party site?
I mean, literally your experience just kind of it's when you're booking with those third-party sites, you're basically booking with them and not the, hotel or airline or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, hotels participate in those because they kinda have to, because so many people use them. It
Mhm.
would be missed revenue if the
Yeah.
hotels didn't participate. Um, but it's low rates, so they're not making a lot of money, it's just the volume, and they just don't touch those reservations. I mean, even years ago when I was working in hotels still, I would go print an arrivals list, and I would see who was coming in that day and how they booked their reservation. So I could see like, oh, it came from this travel agency in
Mhm.
Nashville. Oh, Kelly Henderson booked through booking.com.
Mhm.
And the ones that came in through the third party website, like you just
Don't touch them.
don't touch them.
They're at the bottom of
And
the list.
and if you got to the hotel and there was an issue, they would most likely refer you back to the website that you use. So
Well, that's
Expedia
what
or
kept
booking.com.
happening, but then the website, like Expedia, would then say, "Oh, well, this is the hotel's issue." So they
Yeah.
were both sending me back and forth, and it became very apparent to me, nobody actually gives a shit about my travel booking. They're
Mhm.
just like, "Yeah, we're not gonna deal with you." Like,
Yeah.
Expedia very much was like, "We got your money." And then the hotel was very much like what you're saying. I was at the bottom of the list, and it was easy for them to be like, "You didn't book through us, so we're not making this our problem. This is a you problem."
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I don't think those websites are all bad. I think what you were saying earlier about it takes some of the like research work away. I
Mhm.
agree with you. If you're not, you know, if you don't know much about where you're going or like what flights operate in that destination or whatever. If you wanna look around on those websites,
Right.
that is totally cool. And even if, you find a hotel that you like and it's, it's saying it's a little cheaper there than it is on the hotel's website. A lot of times, the nicer hotels, if you call and ask to talk to someone in reservations or even sales, and just kind of explain what's happening, they'll try to work with you, maybe honor that rate that you're seeing on
Mhm.
Expedia or whatever, or meet you in the middle. Some of them won't, but I used to do that. I would tell people, like, if I had a corporate account or something and they're like, "Hey, our rate is 200, but I see a $150 rate on Expedia." I would
Right.
just honor the Expedia rate for them.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it differs from hotel to hotel, and, like, that's not gonna happen at, like, a, $200 a night price point probably.
Right.
Because if you call the Courtyard by Marriott or the Hilton Garden Inn or whatever, they're gonna be like, "What are you talking about?"
Mhm. They
So
don't care.
it's
Yeah.
it that really only works when you get to, like, a certain, like, level of property.
But it's nice to have in your back pocket, and like what you're saying about you can still utilize those sites for research, and here's the thing. In the past, I would never have said utilize a business and not pay them, but because of how bad my experience was, like, I'm not even exaggerating, you guys. This is how adamant I feel about this. I will, in the future, use them as research platforms. But I'm not going to ever book again through a third party. Like, I might
Yeah.
get the information, but then I'm always going to either call the hotel, call the airline, and book direct. And Expedia, if you're listening, this is what you get. Like, you treat people like shit, and this is how things will happen. When I posted about that even, I had so many DMs saying the same thing. And so I think
Mhm.
it's like we all have to unite because they're treating their customers like shit.
Ah, Sadly, I don't think they're gonna go anywhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably
there'll
not.
always be a thing.
Still gonna try to spread the word.
I mean, awareness.
Awareness.
Awareness,
That's what this
yeah,
podcast is all about.
yeah.
What's the biggest myth that you would say about people booking online? Like, why do we think that that seems like such a good idea versus actually maybe even using a professional or utilizing someone like you? Do you think there's a myth? Like, why do we do that?
I think it was good marketing, and it was kind
Mhm.
of sold to people as, like, "Come here, we have it for cheaper,
Yeah.
and it's all here." So, like, and it's for the masses, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think people that are doing corporate travel and entertainment industry travel and, like, high-end leisure travel, like, they're not using those sites.
Mhm.
It's people, like, taking their vacation in Myrtle Beach every summer or, like, that kind of,
Right, so
like,
you want something
travel.
easy. I think it's like one thing I realize about our society, and I think we're seeing this in a lot of different places, is that we want things that are easier, and that's why influencers blew up the way they did. You're like, "Tell me how to live my life to make it easier. Take the, like, research out for me, take the time out, just tell me what to do so I don't have to think about it because 'cause I'm so overloaded in my life." And so maybe
Mhm.
things like those sites have grown because of that. It takes out the extra effort, it seems, until something
Yeah,
goes wrong.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it probably is lovely if everything goes as it should,
sure, yeah.
but when it goes wrong, it goes
It
wrong.
goes really, really wrong.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how travel has changed since the last time we did the podcast. I know,
Yeah.
obviously, we've kinda touched on the fact that the pandemic happened, and you had this idea like, "Okay, the world has shut down. So, 1, we're getting a reframe on what's important. And 2, when you can't travel, it seems like you would just be so excited and grateful and happy to have any sort of travel experience. But the world has changed. So, we need to be more patient and understanding. But what's been the truth about post pandemic travel?
Well, like, right after when things started to open back up, it was a bit of a struggle, like, there weren't rental cars to be had anywhere, like, it
Oh,
was
yeah, I forgot
really
about that.
there were all these, like, weird things, and, like, people weren't fully staffed yet,
Mhm.
and it was just so there were so many issues, and, like, travel came roaring back because people wanted to go places
Of course,
again.
yeah.
So, it was pretty challenging, and I think, like I had said earlier, some people, like, doubled down on the bad behavior, and when it was met with all of, those staffing shortages and things like that, like, hotels took away, like, room service and
Mhm.
just, like, weird things that you don't think about. It made things difficult. I would say that it normalized at this point, but it's not really the same, and I don't think we'll ever go back to what it was before, but good things did come out of it.
Okay,
Like,
tell us the good things.
well, airlines, a lot of them used to charge, like, the $200 change fee if you
Oh,
needed
that's
to,
true,
like,
yeah.
switch a flight or something. That went away. I mean, there still is some change fees on, like, international stuff, things like that, but as a whole, that doesn't really exist anymore.
I don't think I
Um,
realized that was a pandemic thing, a pandemic change. I guess
yeah,
the
like,
airlines needed business.
I mean, that was a good thing.
Well, you were talking earlier about even the movement of people and how, we just have these high expectations, and I think we thought after COVID, surely people are gonna have better behavior, and it almost was like the
Mm,
opposite.
it got worse, yeah, I think it just got worse.
What,
And
like impatience, or what are you seeing?
yeah, yeah, because I do think that there have been more delays and disruption,
It
uh,
does seem that way with airlines
thing
specifically.
yeah, and, I mean, that's at least what I see,
Mhm.
um, and people are just like, everybody is just so ready to be angry,
Mm,
and it's like, you're not the only one that can't get to their destination
right.
now, like, let's all just chill, and
Yeah.
yelling at the ground crew or the gate agent, like, it's not gonna get you anywhere because people don't respond to that anymore. I feel like before you could kinda yell
Mhm.
and maybe get your way, and that's not really a thing anymore. You're gonna get yourself into a deeper hole if you're, mistreating someone. I think people just aren't willing to be flexible. What I
Mm,
have seen though is, and I actually kind of like this, some clients will book a flight and then
okay.
also book a backup to
Oh,
have.
in case
Um,
delays happen or things like that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like if it's like a thing where they have to be there and like if they, that flight doesn't take off or they miss it or whatever. So I do book more of that now.
Okay.
So like I'll book like two flight. You can't do that on the same airline, but, you can use another airline as a backup option and then just buy a refundable fare and refund that if you don't need it.
Well, that's a good
Um,
tip. So basically what I'm hearing you say is be prepared
and be
for
flexible.
and be flexible. So be prepared for delays and disturbances to your travel, and then also be flexible, have a backup plan kinda thing.
Yeah. And like, we're, as soon as we're done here, we're driving to the airport, flying to New York. And
Yeah,
anytime I travel now, I just kind of, I mean, I want it to go smoothly and
right.
everything to be on time and all of that. But like, I just kind of mentally prepare for it to not be smooth
Yeah.
because it might not be.
Do a
It's
little
not
extra meditation, maybe.
exactly. It's not the end of the world either. So
Right. We have lived through worse at this point of
yeah,
life than your flight
yeah.
being delayed. Okay, so
Mhm.
get some perspective, have a backup plan, and then also just prepare for there to be delays so that you're not like mentally and emotionally, so you're not freaking out if that
Right.
does happen. I love
Yeah.
that tip. Let's do a little more. Like, I love these travel hacks. What are some common mistakes you see people make when they're booking travel?
Booking basic economy on the airlines.
What does that even
It's
mean?
the airlines rolled this out a couple of years ago,
Okay.
before the pandemic. It's another fare category, so it's their cheapest,
Okay.
and it will say somewhere on their website, like, basic economy, but it's usually kinda small.
Mhm.
And so people, they don't look at that. They see, like, the cheaper price, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, let's go with that." But it's super restrictive.
In what
So
way?
you can't change it.
Mm,
If you wanna change it, you basically forfeit the amount of that ticket. You don't get a seat assignment until, like, you check in and you're at the airport. There's restrictions on baggage. It's such a mess, and we actually have an overlay in our system that doesn't even let you pull that price or book
mm.
the basic economy ticket because it's so problematic. I've had people, like, similar to your Expedia story, book a basic economy ticket and then, like, lose their mind because they can't
They
do it.
can't
Like,
make any
and the
changes.
airline will basically be like, "You booked it, everything was there in the fine print."
Ugh,
Like,
that is giving me
so
total trauma memory of Expedia.
so that I would say is a big one because,
Okay.
people don't know
Well, we
to
see cheapest, and that's what we're gonna
yeah,
go with.
yeah, but a lot of times, most of the time, it's not really that much cheaper. Like 20 to maybe $50 cheaper. It's, like, not worth it.
So that's like emotional and a mental fee that would be worth it to pay.
Yeah,
Okay.
for
I
sure,
I
yeah.
do find that with travel, it's hard because obviously, especially if you're doing a big trip, you wanna cut costs anywhere you can because the costs add up very fast, especially
Mhm,
on big trips. But really, a lot of times it ends up not being worth it because you'll end up coming across problems, you can't make changes, and it puts such a damper on your trip when that's
yeah,
the experience that truthfully, the mental and emotional fee of whatever that is kinda worth it
mhm,
if you can afford it.
yeah, 100%.
That's interesting. Okay, so is there anything else? So definitely don't book the basic economy for reasons like we've discussed before. Don't book through a third party.
Don't book
Same
through a
thing.
third
It's all
party.
about changes and difficulty with that, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I've always said this, but, like, I get to the airport on the earlier side, not, like,
Right.
crazy, but I know you like to, like, play a little closer than me.
It's not that I like to, it's just it's a
It's
thing. It's
it's
a
your
thing. It's
wiring.
a
It's your wiring.
problem. I literally could have all the time in the world, and somehow I'll find a way to be late for something.
You're like the scene in Home Alone when they're running through O'Hare.
Yes. And sometimes it works, and I'm like, "Nailed it," because I
Yeah,
got there later than everyone. I didn't waste a lot of extra time. But the times where it's stressful, it's really stressful.
yeah, and see, I get so worked up, like, with stuff
Right.
like that, so I just don't put myself in the
Those
situation because
positions.
yeah. So, I'm all about getting to the airport early, although I'd have to say that probably all of my clients don't.
Right.
As much as I say do, they don't.
Yeah. So I have noticed that since COVID, we need to allot a little more time. Like, it
Mhm.
seems like everything just moves a little slower. It was really bad right after the pandemic. Well, I do
Yeah.
think it's gotten a little better, but especially here in Nashville, like, our airport's grown. You really do have to add in traffic time, getting around, things like that. So I do think it's about knowing your city, knowing your airport, and maybe giving yourself that little extra bit of time. I'm gonna work on that. It's a
Um,
constant work in progress on that.
I know, yeah. You have gotten better, I will say.
Sometimes. Ooh, I don't
Yeah.
know. Do you have any tips for I always hear about people being like, "Oh, I got upgraded," or "I got this extra perk." Do you have any tips for people like me who just I don't even know where to look for that stuff or how to go about that? Like, what would you say is a good way to set yourself up to get an upgrade, have a better travel situation, things like that?
I mean, it all comes down to how much you're traveling.
Okay.
So, if you're taking a few flights a year, like, domestically, you're not gonna get upgrades, and you're not gonna have a high status or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, those people, I think you just have to pay to have the
Okay.
nicer experience. But people that travel frequently or
Yeah.
somewhat frequently should really pick an airline that they enjoy and that they've had a good experience on and just try to stick with that airline,
Okay.
to get to a level of status.
Mhm.
And then once you're there, then you get to enjoy things like, free bags or potential upgrades, lounge access. The
Right.
other thing is that there are credit cards out there that will kind of get you some of this stuff.
Mhm.
I think the airline loyalty programs are literally ever changing. Like, they just change
Constantly.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I think some changes are good. Like, Delta has it used to be that you could essentially just, like, buy your way into their lounges with a credit card, with a Delta American Express. They've changed the program, so now you have to have, like, the top card, like the reserve, to get you lounge access, but those things do help. I have the Delta Reserve Amex,
Okay.
and Brian has the American Airlines MasterCard. So, like, we get lounge access with American and with Delta and the free bags, and it
So
comes with
you're saying,
others.
like, as a couple, it's a really good thing to invest in 2 different I think that's great. Split the points.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And we travel, like, separately,
Mhm.
and he has switched over to American. Like, he's got status for life on American because of his years in the music business flying all over
Yeah.
the place. But yeah, so, like, there are credit cards out there that, and I'm not an expert on all of them. There are quite a few, but I just went with the Reserve Amex with Delta because I have pretty much always been a Delta person.
Mhm.
I have status on Delta, so it just felt like the right choice. Um, but, outside of those things, I have joked about this with friends in the industry. I feel like you just have to pay now to
Right.
make traveling is kinda miserable, I think.
It's not
I
cush like it used to be.
No, like, I
Yeah.
hate going to the airport. People are on their worst behavior, like, it's just it's not really fun,
That's
I don't
really
think.
funny coming from a person who works in the travel industry.
Yeah, I know, and so I think, there are things you can do that you have to pay for that
Mhm.
make the experience a little better, and
Right.
I do those things usually now when we travel because
You
it does
just
help.
want the peace of mind.
Yeah, yeah,
You have told me though, because I want to circle back to the credit card thing. Like I was saying to you before we did this podcast, yes, I actually want a new credit card. I want to switch because, like you said, some of these points and the card that I currently have, they've changed their program so much that I don't feel like I'm benefiting anymore. And
yeah,
so I was going to look into, okay, which card would be best suited for me. So that's a great tip of pick one airline or pick one kind of hotel property, like a
yeah,
Marriott, a
mhm,
Hilton, whatever, all of those properties and stick with it because you'll get the most points throughout a
mhm.
year. But didn't you tell me there's a certain place that you've gone, like that guy with the points guy or something?
Oh, yeah. He's on Instagram. I think it's just The Points Guy.
Okay.
And he also does a blog or has like a website with all kinds of information. He talks about like the new aircraft that whatever airline is rolling out and like gets into the specifics. And it's really informative.
Okay.
Um, and he talks about credit cards too and like the frequent flyer programs
Mhm.
and the changes and the pros and cons. He's definitely one that I follow. There's also, I believe, a website called NerdWallet,
Oh, I've seen NerdWallet. Yeah.
and it
Okay.
does, like, comparisons, and I think you can, like, filter out, like, travel, and it'll
Mhm.
pull the best, like, travel cards and
Okay.
what the perks are. Because there are others out there, like, Chase has a good one.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of like a broad it's not specific to any, like, brand, I don't believe.
Okay.
And they're out there, but I mean, no one should be using, like, a debit card or you know what I mean? Like, I
Right,
feel like
like, get the
everybody should.
points. Figure
Yes,
out how
yes,
to do that.
and
Yeah.
I never really understood that
Mm,
until this job.
mhm.
But, yeah, it's you absolutely should be getting points and using them for something.
The way I always do it is if because I know a lot of people are like, "Well, I don't like to use credit cards." Well, just pay it off every month. Like, use it
Yeah,
like a debit card,
yeah.
but make the payment after so that you get the points too.
The Amex app, like,
Yeah.
if you open up the app, it'll have, like, the charge that you just made on, whatever, and it has a pay now, like, button
Oh,
next
so
to it. So you
it's
can
like a debit
literally
card,
just,
but
like
you're getting
yeah,
the points.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great tip. So the Points Guy is a good one, and NerdWallet. That's so interesting. I literally got an email from them or a ping from them or something this week, so
Yeah.
go check
Mhm.
those out personally. We did talk a little bit about all those changes Southwest is making because in our last podcast, I was such an avid Southwest person at that point because the clients that were traveling me for work, they all flew Southwest, and
Yeah.
so I had high status, and it does change, like, your whole entire experience if you have like, with Southwest, it's like A-list or A-list preferred, or I had a companion pass for a while where I got someone could fly with me for free at all
Mhm.
times, which is crazy. I mean, all of these benefits, but you were very anti-Southwest.
I threw some shade in that
You
podcast, so
totally
it's like
did. It's
yeah.
changed, though. I think this is what we've seen with all of the airlines. I think it fluctuates, and Southwest went through some big problems for a while with their booking system. I think everything crashed, and so now they're even changing to seat assignments, which is
Mhm.
totally different. Have you seen any other big changes? I know we always talk about too that Southwest, you don't have to pay for bags. But isn't it kind of just, like, equal across the board? Like, their ticket prices are higher now.
Yeah, you and I were just saying this, and Brian and I actually talked about it recently, but, like, I will often find that Southwest is more expensive
Mhm.
sometimes than, American or Delta or whatever. The bag thing is a nice perk, the getting the 2 free bags.
Yeah.
The seating thing, I don't know the specifics. I think it's like the later half of this year is when they start to roll that out. I kind of like that. I thought
Mhm.
the open seating was like chaotic and just not cute.
Stressful.
Yeah.
See, but if you
Um,
had status, it was great because you boarded first and you got to pick whatever
right.
you wanted, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just didn't fly Southwest. But,
Mhm. He was a real diva in the last podcast, if you guys go hear about
but
it.
to me, I have flown Southwest since we did that podcast, and
Yeah.
it wasn't terrible.
Okay, he's coming around.
It's still not my favorite because I do think that, and I've seen these posts on Instagram, like the people who fly Delta are different than the people who fly American than the people who fly Southwest.
Mhm.
And I've seen
It's
like
true.
posts where they like
Like, there's a
make fun of like
personality of
the
the
yeah.
type. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just don't really align with the Southwest.
Okay.
So uh,
The reason I have for so long is I felt like Southwest, somehow everyone else is canceling their flights and Southwest is not. Like, that was happening for a lot. That's changed since our last
mhm,
podcast, but that was my experience at the time. And it was just easy, and their customer service was the best for me, and that was when the old airlines, there was always a change fee, and my schedule is one that I need to be able to have flexibility with
mhm,
changes. And so but again, a lot of that has changed, and I do think you're right, like, each airline has a different personality, so it really is about finding which one fits you best. Like, a
totally.
lot of people
Yeah.
would go with what's always cheapest, but I think
Mhm,
it's imperative if you're traveling a lot, like you said, to stick with one more to really reap the benefits of being a loyal customer.
mhm. I agree.
Okay, well, what overall do you feel like there's one piece of advice? Like, we're at the beginning of 2025 right now, and obviously people are probably thinking through, okay, if I'm going to plan a big trip or what's my big splurge going to be? Do you have one piece of advice that you would give as a person that sits in your position and is booking travel constantly?
Well, I mean, I have more than one, but
Okay, well, give us a few.
I would say first and foremost, be flexible and be kind if you're gonna get further and have a better experience. But most people don't need a travel agent because we're not really here to get you a deal.
Okay.
We're here to get you access and help and maybe some perks along the
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
But a lot of people just want their vacation to be cheap and a good time. And you
Sure.
don't need a travel agent for that.
Right.
But if you're taking like a once in a lifetime kind of trip, and you're going out of the country or whatever, you're spending a lot of money and you really, I mean, I have felt this when I book trips sometimes, like you're you're spending a lot of money, so you want it to be amazing, and there's
Of
a little bit
course.
of stress behind that because you're like,
Right.
"Well, if it's not
This
amazing."
better be great. Yeah.
Right. So, I think if you're in that situation, it's probably a good idea to engage a travel agent
Okay.
because you're really not gonna end up paying them a whole I mean, it's probably gonna be for, like, a leisure trip like that, you're probably gonna pay maybe tops, like, $300, something
Mhm.
like that. But you're getting a professional who knows where you're going, knows the properties, probably has a contact at the hotel that you wanna stay in.
Mhm.
They might be able to get you a complimentary upgrade to the next room type. Like, there are things that they can do behind the scenes that you just don't have access to.
Or even
Um,
think about. The
yeah.
stuff we were talking about
Mhm.
before the podcast, you were saying sometimes you'll use a car booking service because the whole day has been really stressful and you're like, "I just want someone to pick me up, for me not to have to worry about it, to help me with my bags," things like that, and you
Mhm.
mentioned a site that you use that I was like, "Wait, what's that? I would have never even
Yeah.
known this."
Yeah. Yeah, it's Black Lane, by the way.
Black Lane,
Black Lane.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. They're big in Europe and bigger cities. I don't think they have service in Nashville. So, there's a time and a place, I think, for a travel agent. Of
Yeah,
course, we exist in the entertainment industry and, corporate America and things
luxury
like that.
travel, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but people who are just concerned about, you know, getting the best price don't really need to engage a travel agent. I would say Google and, go direct shop on Expedia and Orbitz,
Right,
and then go to that vendor and book the ticket with them or book
okay.
the hotel with them. And then, yeah, if you're going to do one of those big trips and you're spending a lot of money, find the right travel agent because there are a lot of quacks out there.
Talk about that a little bit. I was gonna ask you this question, but you're bringing it up, so it's perfect.
Yeah, there are a lot of these you know, it like reeks of pyramid scheme. Like, it's like,
Mm,
"Come join our agency and you can, like, book your friend's vacation travel and make money off of it." Like,
mhm,
that kind of a
mhm.
sell, and people do it, and it's just those are not the people that you wanna book a trip with. Like, you want an agent who's got an IATA number,
Okay,
and they should be affiliated with a larger agency because
okay.
what comes along with that is you get access to contracts and perks and upgrades and those kinds of things that those, like, one-off travel agents in your little hometown or whatever don't
Wouldn't
have.
have. So we
Yeah.
need to look I was gonna say, how do we find them? But you said look for an IATA number?
Well, you can't really look for their IATA an IATA number is what a travel agency gets, and it's like an electronic stamp, like,
Mm.
from the agency, and there's no way for you to really know
What if
if an
people are
agent
at like, is it weird to be like, "Can I see your IATA number?"
I mean, they could ask if they were registered,
Oh, okay.
with an IATA number for sure. But I guess what I would say is, like, if you're planning a trip to Italy, you
Mhm.
could Google Los Angeles travel agents specializing in Italy.
Okay, so
uh,
different agents specialize in different trips.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And it's like you've got entertainment travel agents who were kind of like off on our own.
Right.
And then you have leisure travel agents who are doing like the, pricey vacations and safaris and things like that. But then you have people booking cruises and that's all they do. You have people like doing Disney stuff and
Mhm.
that's all they do. There's a lot out
So
there.
those people are like I mean, not to be cheesy, but they're like experts in that kind of trip, which is the
Yep.
ones you would want because 'cause they'll know all the ins and outs,
Mhm.
where you can get the perks, where you can get upgraded, things like that.
And the other thing is, a lot of the big agencies, if you just call and talk to like the front desk person,
Mhm.
they'll put you in touch with someone.
Okay.
Like, the appointment group is who I'm affiliated with, and they have an office here in Nashville. You could call the Nashville office and talk to the front desk and, like, "Hey, do you guys specialize in travel to
Mhm.
Italy?
Mhm.
This is what I'm doing," and they can point you in the right direction.
They'll tell you who to use. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I think a travel agent sounds like an extra expense that maybe it sounds intimidating to us regular folk or whatever, but from what you've described to me, it's not again, like, if you're spending a ton of money on a trip, it's not that much more to add this little
Mhm.
fee in, and there may be a lot of things that you get or don't even know to get, or they can lead you in certain directions of different excursions or things that you might wanna do that you wouldn't know would even be possible. So sometimes it just takes out the guesswork, which to me sounds worth it.
Yeah, and while you're on that trip, you have someone in your corner. Like, if you're abroad and something goes wrong
Yeah.
and, you need a different flight or whatever, you can call that agent and they'll help you. And
Mhm.
then you're not standing in line or arguing with a, front desk person or whatever.
Yeah. Ugh, that
Mhm.
sounds lovely to have someone do the battle for me. I mean, so obviously the biggest thing we're leaving this podcast with is never use a third party.
Never.
Never
Never.
use a third party, guys. Just trust
Never.
me. Trust me on that one. All right. Well, if people want to know more about you, where could they find you?
I mean, I'm just
You fly under the
me
radar
on
quick.
Instagram. It's TJ Deal. I mean, shoot me a DM.
Yeah.
I'll answer. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm all for pointing people in the right direction. If I don't know, I can find somebody that does. That
Okay.
comes up a lot
Okay.
in my
Yeah.
job. Like, people travel places and I don't, I'm not
It's not your
specializing in that.
expertise.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put all of his info in the description of this podcast, as well as the couple things that we mentioned about like the points guy and all that. I'll link that for you guys.
Oh, we forgot to mention Erica Kohlberg on
Oh,
Instagram.
yes. I actually love her because she gives you all these like fine
Like,
print
legal.
legal
Yeah.
issues. She's a lawyer that specializes in kind of how to figure out travel and credit cards and things like that for yourself. Like get away with some of the things that the
Well,
bigger
it's
corporations are missing.
yeah, and she dives into, like, what do the airlines actually owe you when
Yeah.
X happens.
Yes.
So, yeah, she's a good one.
I'll link her Instagram. She's a good follow for sure on Instagram. I'll
Mhm.
link that in the description of this podcast as well. I know you have some travel to go get to, so we don't want to keep you any longer.
Oh, yeah. Headed to New York.
Was there ever I do wanna ask you, do you have a favorite place you visited recently or one spot, like a property that you're just like, "I can't get over"? I know you've done a lot of travel this last year.
Yeah, I was in the UK and Switzerland in
Yeah.
October, early November, and we stayed at Heckfield Place,
Okay.
which is it's like an hour outside of London and maybe like 30, 40 minutes from Heathrow, but it's like out in the countryside. It's an old manor house that they converted into this like five-star. I was blown away.
I
Like,
remember you posting about this place.
I have stayed in some nice places, one of the perks of my job, but
Right.
this was just I, could not get over it. The whole experience, the arrival experience, the property itself, the room, it's on a farm, and, everything that they do there comes from the farm.
So all
So,
the food, all of
yeah, it's
oh,
wild, and,
wow.
they have this, cabinet in your room, and you, open it up, and it's got, coffee and tea, and the milk in the refrigerator is from the cows on the farm.
Wow.
The soaps are all milled there.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was mind-blowing.
That's
Like,
organic,
th
organic.
the most beautiful place I've ever seen, massive grounds and the forest, you can walk around and just kinda, be on your own, and oh my god,
I wanna go to there.
it
Ugh.
was I would say it's probably if you're in London, it's probably a great place to, end your London trip
Mm.
because it's so decompressing, and
Yeah.
it's pretty close to Heathrow, so, you
Okay.
can finish up with the city and head out
Right.
there and just kind of relax. Their spa, I think I told you about the medicine sauna thing that we did in the spa.
What is that?
It was they were, beating me with, bushels of oak leaves and, Bernie. I know it sounds ridiculous, but, I got emotional.
Oh, I'm
We were
sure it sounds like an emotional experience.
in this room, and you went from, the sauna to the steam room, and then you would sit around a fire, and they would give you this elixir to drink, and, you're eating the leaves that came out of the garden, and it's like
Some people are listening like,
it's
"What?" But actually,
it
my
sounds
audience
deep.
pretty ready for this stuff at this
But
point.
but they had these, like,
They're prepared.
Nordic priestesses who were, like, chanting and,
Oh
like,
my.
it was I I cannot say enough
Sounds
things about that place. Yeah,
unbelievable.
it is one of the coolest hotel experiences I've ever had,
It's called
ever.
Heckfield Place?
Yeah, Heckfield Place. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
outside of
just
London.
so stunning.
London too, so that
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
magical.
Mhm. But yeah,
Wow.
that's probably the Dolder Grand in Zurich was also kinda blew my mind. It was just
Yeah,
like everything, the service, the property, Zurich, it was just it was amazing.
yeah,
But those are yeah,
up
those are
there.
sticking out. Mhm.
Okay, well, if you are looking for international travel, that comes from a man who has done a lot of really great travel, so he's sipping from his teacup right now. Tyler, thanks for doing this with me. We needed an update.
We did, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this was due.
It was my pleasure. Always good to see you.
Likewise, and safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys for listening. You can also hit Tyler up if you have any questions. He is happy to answer in direct, I think. So,
Obrigado.
all of that info in the description of the podcast. Thanks for listening.